fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin', won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and you have had the good fortune to tune into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about them in the ways that they affect you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, your family's wealth and health and happiness, and try to do it with a little humor, usually. Sometimes that's harder than other times, and this is actually one of those times that it's going to be a little harder to keep it light, because I had a show all planned out. You know, I had my nice little outline, and I wanted to talk about a few things before we had a guest coming on. Yeah, we're going to have a special guest on the show, hopefully, with there's a standoff out in the west over another natural gas pipeline that they want to go through Native American territory here in the U.S. It's called Line 3, and we have someone from the GNU Collective has agreed to be on the show to talk about that at 8:15. But before that, I had a few things I wanted to talk about. One, you know, I'm here in the Boston area, and I have to go into Boston sometimes, and it's not unusual to get stuck in the Boston traffic, just stopped on a 4-lane highway with thousands of cars all around me. And, you know, I have an electric car, luckily, but it's a plug-in hybrid. But the other cars are all there idling, their engines are running, and they're sitting there going nowhere. And I realized that since most of the CO2 that's been put into the air has been for transportation, and most of that transportation has been people driving cars, and places like here in the Boston area, New York City area, in California, around the big cities, a lot of that time in those cars has been just sitting there in you know, the parking lots, so to speak, that the interstates turn into, and it's stuck in traffic jams, idling. A lot of that CO2 that's destroying the planet right now was just put there by cars just sitting there running, doing nothing. And it was just, you know, that struck home. So I just wanted to mention that. One other thing I wanted to mention really quick I've been getting Facebook ads for quote unquote predator season. And the picture shows this guy, this male model, and he's got one of those male model poses, you know, like Steve Martin used to mock out, where he's looking in one direction and his arms are like going in another direction, and he's in this really expensive camo with all this stuff hanging from his neck, and on his back, tied on his back, is what looks like a wolf. And as we've reported, the Trump administration removed endangered species protection for wolves, but that doesn't mean they're not actually endangered. There literally aren't enough wolves to keep their population up. And here we've got Cabela's, and they have an ad which is essentially saying go shoot wolves. Now, coyotes can take hunting pressure. I mean, coyotes have been expanding their range despite people trying to hunt them like crazy, but wolves can't. Wolves don't reproduce as quick. They need a larger area to live in. Wolves eat coyotes, interestingly enough. So if you don't like coyotes, your best bet is to just let wolves move into an area. But please don't hunt wolves. Even though you don't get arrested for it now, it's still not, environmentally speaking, it's not the right thing to do. I've been told we've been joined by my wonderful co-host, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. Are you on the line?
I'm here.
Yeah, good. Normally, I would just keep talking about stuff like that in this first part of the show for a while, but this is not a normal week by any definition.
It isn't.
No. What happened on Wednesday in Washington? Go ahead.
It's crushed a lot of people's hopes that 2021 would be nicer and calmer than 2020. Very quickly, right off the bat.
It sure did.
Get that in the bud.
I know. I saw some pretty good memes on that. One was, "Dear 2021, I have had my 7-day trial, and I do not wish to make this purchase. Please."
Yes. Go away. We don't like you.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to talk about, two things on that, what happened on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. One is that some of the people who were involved in it are now claiming that this group, that there were agent provocateurs in there, that there were people egging the crowd on, and then literally some are saying all the bad stuff was done by these agent provocateurs, but only the victims, only the people who died, those were actual Trump supporters.
Somehow. And the dumb thing is that beforehand they said they were going to do this. They were all, we're going to invade Washington. We're going to invade Washington. Oh, Antifa invaded Washington, and tried to blame it on us.
Right, and as they invaded, they did Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds. Hey, I'm invading Washington. Look at me breaking into the Capitol. Yeah, but the point I wanted to make was, even if that were true, that there were some agent provocateurs sprinkled into the crowd, I have to say, so what?
You can always not respond to provocation. If somebody tells you, oh, go do this, go smash that, you can always be like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly. And I have been in protests, most notably the protest in Boston in the year 2000, when there was a big protest because the Green Party candidate there, Ralph Nader, wasn't being allowed to participate in any of the debates. And in that crowd on that day, there were agent provocateurs. There were guys, they were in ski masks, and they were standing towards the back, a little bit back from the front lines, and they were yelling profanities at the police. They started throwing things at the police. It looked like it was going to get violent, and but we shut them down. We were like, we're not going to do that. So, and in fact, there was somebody got up on the barricades and said, look, people, this is not how we do things. We are a non-violent movement. And we shut them down. So, the mere fact that there were agent provocateurs, I did an analogy. It's kind of like, if someone gets arrested because they've, committed a crime with somebody else, like, and then their defense is, they offered me money to do this illegal thing. What could I do? I was helpless. It's like no, it's unacceptable. But one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about what happened on Wednesday, in terms of the environment, in terms of ecology, is that protecting the environment depends on the rule of law. Now, we're being compared, a lot of people are tossing out the comparison of what's happening here to a banana republic. And I think it's important to remember that what actually happens in banana republics when their elected governments get overthrown, when their structures, their government structures break down, is that the exploitive industries, like the banana industry, like the oil industry, like mineral industries with mining companies, once the government, which can do regulation, is removed, they move in and they just take all the resources. And, this is what we want to avoid. We want to have actual rule of law. We want to protect the environment. We want to protect each other. And it's essential that we have it, because if we don't, we've seen what happens in these other countries where the governments are successfully overthrown, is that the people end up starving, the environment gets ruined, the corporations take everything they can, and then they just move on. And I don't want that to happen to the United States of America. And so what I wanted to do... Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's a lag. I have trouble. But there was this libertarian settlement in Vermont that was kind of destroyed by bears.
Really?
There's a small town in Vermont. It had some libertarians in it, and they invited a bunch of their friends to move there. So it was rich people who could afford to move, and poor people who didn't really have anything where they were to begin with. So they formed this settlement with, I don't know, little cabins and tents and crap, and they were living up there, but they didn't have any rules because they're libertarians, so they couldn't decide on a coherent policy about bears. I think most of them have left now because some of them were feeding the bears, some were shooting the bears, some were kind of just, trying to avoid the bears, and as I heard, the whole thing went kind of ugly.
Yeah, I mean, the theory that you can have no government at all, that the best government is no government, that's not, in application, you run into big problems. But the one thing I wanted to do
agreement today about what to do about the bears.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
One thing I wanted to do today, since I have this pulpit, since I have this stage, and I really feel this is essential. And I know a lot of the people listening today are perhaps sympathetic to Trump, perhaps even sympathetic to some of these protesters that overran the Capitol on Wednesday. But you guys have a special responsibility right now, because they're threatening to do it again, and they're threatening to bring guns again, and they're threatening to disrupt the inauguration of our next president. And you folks have a responsibility to shout those voices down. You have a movement, you have the Trump movement, but now you have a violent element that is destroying things and killing people. They killed a policeman, after all, beat him to death with a fire extinguisher. You now have a responsibility as part of that movement to shout down the voices that are calling for the army, or for a quote-unquote militia, to descend on Washington, D.C. And if you don't, you are complicit. In this case, if you just are sort of silent and just kind of watch everything as it happens, if you don't speak out, you are actually part of the problem. You are part of the violent part of your movement, because if you don't stop it, then you are aiding and abetting it. And so, if you've got that crazy friend on Facebook who's talking about, or on Twitter or on Parler, who's talking about, going down there on the 19th with his guns and so forth, tell him no. Say, no, don't do that. That's crazy. Stop. Sometimes all it takes is a word. Sometimes all it takes is somebody trying to knock some sense into you. And unfortunately, people who are too deep into it sometimes can't be turned, or won't even listen to voices outside of the group, outside of the MAGA bubble. But if you're inside that bubble, you can have a special kind of influence. And so you can tell them, we're not doing this. We are not doing this. We are not going down that path to overthrow the rule of law, to destroy the United States of America with guns by preventing the elected president from taking office. You can do that. That's within your power. And if you try, and even if you fail, at least you are on the right side in this conflict, that you're on the side of law and order. that you're on the side of protecting the United States of America, which is essential if we want to continue to have the United States of America. And so, like all shows, I'm going to open this up at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. You can call in about what happened Wednesday. You can call in about any kind of environmental or ecological issue. And on this particular day, I will actually take sports calls on one sports event. And that is...
What is it? Which one?
Yeah, that is the Bills' victory in the wild card game, because I was at an Italian deli here in Boston, and it's called Aiello's, and they happen to have a large screen TV, and that happened to be playing the last 2 minutes of that game, and it was the most compelling football I've seen in 25 years, literally 25 years, because I was part of the whole Buffalo Bills movement when they went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row and lost 4 years in a row. But it
full disclosure, are you from Buffalo, or the Buffalo area or something?
Yeah, I actually kind of
Joe's showing bias.
I am.
Bias
Yeah.
Or surrounding sports teams from the Buffalo area. Yep, I knew it.
Yeah, my wife is actually the one from Ohio, born in Toledo, and that's why we're living in Ohio. But I was born in Western New York, so it was inevitable that I get caught up in Bills fever, as they call it. So I will take a sports call on that game specifically, but otherwise, if whatever else you want to talk about in terms of the ecology or the environment, we'd love to have you in and give us a call.
I would like to point out, Joe, that my stepmother is all over this, trying to calm down the riled up MAGA people, because she's a lifetime Republican, but not a Trumpy. Did not vote for Trump. I think it physically hurt her to she voted for the Libertarian guy, so it's not great. But Trump, no Trump, so she has depths to which she will not sink, and she's out there. She has Republicans to the further right friends, including my cousin Bill, God help us, who I think is in some sort of survivalist cult in Arizona or something right now. But yeah, she's trying to talk some sense into Bill. She's doing it. Okay, it's uphill work, but Renee is on it, and other people as well.
Well, good, and hopefully Renee is not alone. And I've seen postings that people were saying all Republicans are complicit in what happened on Wednesday, and I had to remind them that a lot of Republicans never did support Trump. A lot of Republicans didn't vote for him in the primaries. He won the primaries, so but it's there's a strong element, there's a strong streak of sanity somewhere still in the Republican Party. I'm convinced, and those are the people.
There's a little,
those are the people that need to absolutely must step forward right now, speak out, and talk and prevent, use their voice, use their freedom of speech to try to prevent this tragedy, which looks like it's on the way for the inauguration that's coming up on the 20th. Yeah, so, I mean, if you know somebody who's planning to descend on D.C. on the 19th with their guns, try to talk them out of it. Just, use every rhetorical trick try to talk them out of it, but B, turn them in. B, call the police.
So,
inform on them.
Curiosity.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you think about? Okay, I have some friends. Okay, one friend on the entire internet. Who's? What do you think about the idea of leftists going there to counter the rightist demonstrations? I'm guessing you're probably against it.
No, I'm not against it. I think it needs
never
to happen.
mind then.
Yeah, but by counter, it's very important. Counter is very important. How that's done. If the leftists show up with guns too, that is absolutely the worst possible thing that could happen, and I'm against that. But if they go nonviolently, if they go to be, human shields for democracy, if they go to try to protect the law and the Constitution without resorting to violence, that I'm all in favor of. That I think needs to happen.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, not much does right now, but and our guest apparently has decided not to call, or is I don't no sign of them. Or have they called, Russell? Do we have anybody on the line? Okay, thanks. So I'm going to go on to our advertisers right now. Foregrade Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They restore wildlife habitats, and they lead outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy, from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways to get a hold of them. One is to call at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Another is to go to their website, which is wcparks.org. That's wcparks.org. You can download their app, their nifty app, at the App Store. Just search for WC Parks. And, of course, you can find them on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media. Our show is also brought to you by our patrons. And these are people who've gone to patreon.com, and they have just looked at our wonderful patrons page, chosen a level of membership that is good for them, matches their budget, and every month a tiny little bit comes out of their checking account and comes over into our account, and it's very good. And I wanted to give a shout out today. I guess I was brought to my attention that we have a new fan. Chris from Youngstown has said nice things about us on her Facebook page. And I also wanted to say that we have moved up again in the rankings on our podcast provider, Podomatic. And we are actually up in the 40s now, in the top 40. So Casey Kasem would have mentioned our name. And that's out of thousands. Actually, it's tens of thousands of podcasts, and so we're
number 40.
In the news subcategory. So just to be clear,
in the subcategory.
Woohoo! Yeah, we're not competing with songs and things like that, but we are there on in the talk subcategory. We're up in the 40s, so that's wonderful.
Wow!
Thank you. And also, those who were listening might have noticed we didn't air last week, but we did. What I did was a clip show. I took the highlights of 2020, our best interviews from 2020, strung them together, and so if you wanted to, complete your set of listenings to Foregrade Future, you can go on. It's on our podcast and on our YouTube channel, and so you can go back and listen to that. All right. An attempt to return to normalcy here, and it's time to go on to our eco news stories. And I'm really disappointed that the promised guest didn't join us. The protest on line 3, because that's a very important, dramatic story. They're trying to stop another natural gas pipeline from going on, but there's many other stories happening right now. One of the big ones is ANWR, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. We've been following this right along, and we've had a guest, Mr. Itchuk, has been on several times, Carl, to talk about what's going on with ANWR. And essentially what's happening is the Trump administration has issued illegal leases for ANWR for oil and gas drilling. And a very important aspect here, this story is being spun by the mainstream media and unfortunately by EcoWatch, which is another environmental news organization, and they're all spinning it as a failure for the Trump administration, that these leases were failures because the biggest companies didn't come in and pay the expected amounts for the oil and gas leasing in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. But what happened is 600,000 acres were leased, and the companies that bought them, smaller companies, oil companies, paid $14 million to lease them. So the wildlife refuge is under threat. These leases are being challenged in court, but if the court challenge fails, roads will be built, oil derricks will be strung all across the refuge, with the inevitable oil spills and oil lakes and ponds, because that's what you have in the Arctic. Next to each oil well, you've got this pond of spilled over oil that birds land in it and sink to the bottom and die, and it's a horrible, horrible destruction of the refuge. And it's being spun as a failure because the Trump administration was saying, oh, we're going to make $900 million in these leases, and they only made $14 million. But the real objective was destroying the refuge, and that is proceeding. And so the spin from the mainstream media on this story is 180 degrees wrong. This is a terrible thing the Trump administration is trying to do, and an illegal thing. Again, as we know. Yeah, go ahead.
If it turns into an oil-soaked wasteland because all the little companies are using it, then they can say, well, it's not really much of a refuge. Let's just go ahead and lease it out to the big companies.
That's how it's done. Exactly. Once a road goes in, even if it's a road to a small derrick, quote unquote, once that road's there, then they can say, oh, look, this isn't pristine anymore. It's open to anything we want to do. And so that's the terrible thing. So this is not something to say, oh, good, the Trump administration failed. No, that they've succeeded in selling these leases, and if they go through, they will succeed in destroying the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Just another example of illegal activity by this administration.
And I'm sure it gratifies me tremendously, and I'm sure that Trump is very upset that he made less millions of dollars, but still not really a win for the environment.
Right. And as you say, the real goal is to open it, to get that wedge in there, and then 5-10 years down the line, you know what, we'll have another auction, and this time all the big companies did show up. So it's like, that's how it's done, and it's terrible. Here's kind of a bizarre story. The Earth's rotation is accelerating.
Whoa.
And so 2020 seemed like the year that was longer than ever, but it was actually
yes, it did.
Literally one of the shortest years on record because the Earth's spinning increased, and so scientists are talking about having a negative leap second to get all their atomic clocks and everything back in line with the Earth's actual orbit and rotation.
Wow.
Now, naturally, the natural progression is that the Earth is slowing down. The rotation is actually slowing. The days are getting longer. And eventually what happens with, things that are spinning in space, orbiting, is that they eventually get kind of locked in to one side of, so whatever the thing they're orbiting around, the heavier part of the globe, whatever globe is doing the orbiting, eventually it sort of settles so that the one side always faces whatever the orbit's about. So the moon does that with the Earth. Right. One side always faces us, so the rotation matches the orbit. And that's Mercury is the same way with the sun. One side always faces the sun. So the Earth's rotation has been naturally slowing down. But what the scientists think happened here is that the ice caps, so much ice has melted from the ice caps that the actual circumference of the Earth has shrunk, that the Earth has actually gotten smaller, and that caused the rotation to speed up the same way an ice skater, when she starts spinning with her arms out, when she pulls her arms in, that increases her rotation speed. So I would also add, this is my own personal theory, is that all the huge number of trees we lost in 2020, the record forest fires all over the globe, that the trees sticking up into the air, it's 100 feet sometimes of tree, and they weigh tons. All that mass also collapsed down to the ground because it got burned into cinders. And that, I think, personally, I think that also contributed, but that's just my theory.
Yeah.
So now, as you know, I don't like to do all doom and gloom on these news stories. So what I want to talk about is a project that has gone through. It's Xcel Energy, and they have announced that they're shutting all of their Midwest coal plants in the upper Midwest, and they're going for an 80% reduction in carbon emissions. And so they've put out a 500 megawatt solar bid, which is 500 megawatts of solar. That is almost as much power as the Davis-Besse nuclear power plant puts out. Davis-Besse's rated for 800 megawatts. They're going to go 500 megawatts of solar, and that's in Sherburne County. And there's the nice thing about this is that they want to do it on the grounds of the coal plant that they're shutting down. So literally, they are taking down their coal plant and physically replacing it with solar. And they're doing this for economic reasons. If they didn't think they'd make more profit doing it this way, I don't think they would. And so this is great news. And our guest next week is somebody who's working on one of these projects, because solar is really taking off in our neighboring states. Here in Ohio, we've got a little bit of solar growing here and there, but the attitude of the Ohio State Legislature, which is anti-renewables, is driving business and driving companies away from Ohio when they're considering doing these big projects. And of course, First Energy is committed to nuclear and coal, so they're not putting out bids like Xcel is for 500 megawatts at a time of solar. So but it is happening in other places around the country, and our guest next week's going to be talking about that. He's one of the people working on one of these huge solar projects. And so this Xcel Energy project is going to switch on 500 megawatts on the grid before December 31st, 2023. So within 2 years, a nuclear power plant's worth of solar from just this one project. And there's literally hundreds of projects like that going on all over the United States. Not so much here in Ohio, where
this is the thing. I mean,
go ahead.
As a lifetime Rust Belt Midwesterner who has pretty deep roots here, we already took the hit. We already took the hit for America's industrialization. We're still living with those brownfields. We already had to work at the dangerous jobs where they didn't pay enough attention to safety precautions. We're still living with the liver cancer. I know like 3 people who've died of liver cancer. I feel like that's too many. I feel like I should not, in the normal course of things, know that many people who died of liver cancer in Toledo. From the petrochemicals, and then we got the nuclear power plants on both sides. We got the plant on the east side, the refineries, spitting out stuff day and night. And now we have this chance to heal from that. We have this chance to stop suffering. But no, we're going to commit to these old destructive forms of energy that maybe, okay, you wanted the United States to get to a certain point, you wanted our economy to do a certain thing. You wanted to be powerful. Well, okay, we got there, but we don't need those forms of energy to do that anymore, And no, we've decided to just stay committed to that sickness and keep suffering, keep sacrificing people instead of getting out of ahead of it, doing something good for our health, for our financial well-being. We have a chance at that, and we're throwing it away. We're choosing to be just a toxic backwater.
Well, to be fair to us, it's not we who are doing it. It's not we, the people. It's not the average Ohioan, because, all the polls show, 70 to 80% of Ohioans want the switch to wind and solar the way they're doing everywhere else. But it's just the guys, it's mostly guys in Columbus who are forcing it on us, who are passing these terrible laws like House Bill 6 and telling us, we don't care what you want. We don't care what the science says. All we care about is, that
we're being betrayed
those
by
who
these
give
people
us campaign donations continue to do so. Yeah, go ahead.
We paid taxes to all those people, all those years, for doing these horrible, horrible jobs that destroyed people, and now they're betraying us. Well, it was the whole relationship was a betrayal from day one, but, we have a chance at something better now, but they're like, no, we just want to enrich ourselves, and Ohioans can just suffer and die,
Yeah, it's hard to not to draw that conclusion from what they're actually doing. But if you want to make an argument for our legislators, if you want to step in and defend what the Republicans are doing, well, and Democrats, because Democrats also voted for House Bill 6 and voted for HB 104. If you want to defend our legislature, call it at 866-240-1065. We will listen very respectfully. And again, if you want to talk about what happened on Wednesday, also 866-240-1065. And, this is a safe place. This is a nonviolent radio show. That's part of my personal philosophy. And so, if you call in, no matter what your opinion is, you will be listened to, you'll be respected. You might be argued with, you might be disagreed with, and if you go off the deep end, you'll be hung up on. But we'd be happy to entertain a call from anyone at 866-240-1065. Okay.
Joe and Becca are not coming for you.
Right. Another, talk radio particularly is a place where people with different views can get them aired out. It's unique in that way. It's one of the reasons I love talk radio, or have loved talk radio, is because you would hear differing opinions, you would hear both sides, and you could make conclusions, you could hear the arguments made and figure out which side you agreed with or disagreed with. That has kind of fallen by the wayside. So many parts of our society now are just literally just one side or the other, and I don't accept that. I accept that I'm sharing the responsibility of being a citizen of the United States with everybody, no matter what their political stripe is or whether they're a Trump supporter or not. We're all Americans, and so I'm willing to talk to people, but being willing to talk with somebody doesn't necessarily mean you agree with them, or that you want their agenda to succeed. These ideas need to be in conflict. They have to compete, and then the best ideas are supposed to win. That doesn't happen if there's no back and forth, if there's no discussion. So that's one reason I started a call-in radio show. And we're in our third year now, Rebecca. This is year 3 of For a Great Future. Yeah.
I guess the Earth must be spinning faster or something. It doesn't seem like that long.
Yeah. No, it does kind of rush by, doesn't it? When I was doing the clip show, and going back over 2020, and all the guests we had, Lois Gibbs and Helen Caldecott and the scientists and the activists, and then just the regular people that we had as guests too. I was just amazed. I was kind of like, this is a great show.
Yeah.
This is exactly the kind of show I'd listen to if I. So.
Well, you're doing this show and you tend to focus on your mistakes a lot, because that's human nature. You want to improve and stuff, but, it's good to step back and be like, oh, we're not doing that bad.
Right. Yeah. So, all right. Well, another environmental news story, moving on. It appears that the monarch butterflies are extinct in California, practically speaking, extinct. There are a group of monarch butterfly sanctuaries in California, places where the monarchs overwinter, and I believe there's 38 of them, and there are no butterflies in them. Places where just 2 years ago there were upwards of 50,000 monarchs at a time overwintering. This year they're finding less than a dozen. They're finding like 4 or 5, and some there it's like 10 or 12. But functionally speaking, that's not enough to carry on the species, and it just looks like the monarchs are gone from California. And the causes are multiple. Of course, the biggest cause, of course, for all the insect apocalypse is pesticides, our overuse of pesticides. They're putting pesticides into the environment that are wiping out entire insect species, and it looks like the monarchs of California might be amongst them. Another is habitat destruction. Monarchs in California evolved alongside the redwoods, because that's the natural tree of the area, and now those mountains are all covered with eucalyptus trees, which don't provide as good a shelter, and more importantly are extremely vulnerable to fire, because eucalyptus trees are filled with eucalyptus oil, and so if there's a forest fire, and we know California had the worst forest fires in its history in 2020, and so the combination of forest fire, drought, there's a tremendous drought going on in much of California right now, pesticide use, because agriculture production is way up, even as the natural environment in California is being destroyed by drought and fire. The agricultural is expanding and putting more pesticides in the environment. All these things put together, and it looks like monarchs might be done on the West Coast. So that's
so essentially, if you have eucalyptus trees on your property, it's like you've just kind of left a lot of full cans of gas lying around.
Yeah. I mean, a eucalyptus tree is essentially a fire waiting to happen. So, yeah, it is. So that's a terrible thing.
Consider taking an axe to those suckers and planting something else.
Yeah, plant a redwood. If you know somebody who's got property in California, go plant some redwood trees. That's what's supposed to be there. Yeah. And redwoods help with drought because they can catch the sea fog, and using the sea fog, they can drop water on the ground because their needles are designed to do this. And wow. So every fog can be like a rainstorm. And I'm living next to the ocean here right at the moment over in the Boston area, and there's sea fog is really kind of funky. It's cool stuff. It I don't know, it shows up unexpectedly, but it shows up quite frequently, and it just sort of changes the whole atmosphere of the place. I've never lived next to the ocean this long, and just seeing the effect it has on the coastal environment has just been a real eye-opener. It's been a really cool experience. All right.
You always think of plants as being really passive, like, oh, I'm a plant, I'm just going to find a good environment for me to grow. I'm going to look around, find the right amount of shade and the right amount of water or the right chemical composition and do my thing, But what we miss is the extent to which plants make the environment.
Yeah. No, it's true. Plants are extremely active. And if you could watch plants in plant time, if you had like time-lapsed photography in your eyes, you would see they're very active. The way they move around and interact with each other and their environment. There's a lot of plants are actually quite incredible. And there is a cool thing about plants about forest plants, particularly about trees in the forest. It's becoming increasingly clear that the relationship, the roots of trees and forests interact in incredibly complex ways. And it turns out one thing that plants in a forest or trees in a forest do is that sometimes they will keep the roots of a tree that has been cut down. They will keep those roots alive, sometimes for hundreds of years. By the trees which haven't been cut down, feed them sugars and things. And so the roots stay in place. And so there's all kinds of speculation as to why they're doing this. Some are thinking go ahead.
I got an idea. I was looking up, more about the taiga this week, where caribou and reindeer famously live.
Right, the forest that circles the globe. Basically, it goes around the whole planet. Yeah,
the Arctic. Yeah, but the thing about them is that if you cut them down, if you clear cut them, it's very, very dangerous because the roots are holding the very shallow soils that are right over permafrost or bedrock in some cases in place. So that might be why they're feeding those old roots, is because they're holding the soil into place that everybody depends on to live.
Yeah. Well, actually, Rebecca, that actually is what one of the reasons the scientists are speculating that they do it. Exactly. So, yeah. All right. Well, lack of a guest has kind of allowed us to blow through what I wanted to talk about today.
Want to hear more fun facts about the taiga?
Sure. Yeah, let's hear about the taiga. And it is nice to remember that no matter what happens in terms of our politics or in terms of what's going on in our human society, that the nature is still trying to provide for us. It will, as long as we don't destroy it, it will continue to give us what we need. But let's hear what the taiga is doing.
Yeah, well, as Joe mentioned, the taiga is a swampy coniferous circumpolar forest that exists in Siberia, Russia, North America, Alaska. That's mostly just Alaska and Canada. Yeah, Alaska, Canada, Siberia, and Scandinavia all have. It's just kind of this sort of little ring of coniferous trees around the Arctic, basically. It's also called the boreal forest or the cold forest. It can be kind of swampy, though, because the permafrost, it's always over like something hard, like permafrost or bedrock, just like a thin layer of soil over that stuff. So a lot of times the moisture, if something melts a little or if there's rain or something, it has no place to go, and so you get little swamps called muskegs, which are they're deceptive because they're little shallow swamps, but they're usually overgrown like with moss or even small trees over them. So I don't know. That sounds like potentially like something you'd learn to look out for if you lived around one, because you in cold weather, even if it's not frozen weather, you don't suddenly and unexpectedly want very wet feet up to the knee. I'm fairly sure.
Right.
But yeah, it's a biome of evergreens. Essentially, everything has needles or scale leaves, and except for larches. Larches grow really well. They can sort of withstand all that stuff. Spruce, pine, and fir, things with needles or scaly leaves, which needles have very little sap in them. So it's kind of like the thing where the caribou do, where they have special devices to like warm up their legs so that they don't, the blood in their veins doesn't freeze, which is otherwise is a real possibility. Seeds in protected cones so they don't get too cold. Lichens and caribou came up again. Lots of lichens. It's the floor of the forest is, you can't really have, it's all things that are really adapted well to cold. So you have like lichens and moss that grow directly on the forest floor, or things that are very shallowly rooted. So yeah, you need anything that's deep rooted is kind of a treasure. Taiga is a Mongolian word apparently, although I also read that it means little sticks in Russian. So I don't know. I don't know about that. Russia has the biggest one, the biggest taiga. It's 3,600 miles long from the Pacific to the Ural Mountains. And most of the taiga was apparently glaciated in the last ice age. So, yeah. You get critters living there, obviously. Notably, you get moose, which moose actually live mostly on water plants, apparently. Things from the muskeg and water plants from the streams and things. And you got bears, lynx, Siberian tigers, notably, in eastern Siberia, wild boar, rodents, owls, eagles, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it sounds like a really interesting place, and I guess you'd have to go to Alaska to see one in this continent, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I actually, when I went to Denali National Park, I did see the taiga, and it was really cool. The trees around here and around most of the continental United States, the evergreens will, if you look at their branches, they're kind of pointing up, almost like somebody holding up their arms to catch a lot of sunlight. Well, in the taiga, all those branches are pointing down, and I realized when I saw some snow, it was so that they can shed the fantastic amounts of snow that falls on them, because otherwise the branches would just break from the weight of all that snow. The way they're designed, and you can actually see that each one, it kind of acts like a little tent, because the snow that slides off of them kind of builds up around the base, and it kind of makes a little shelter inside under the tree. It's really cool.
Which, of course, I remember loving as a child, because it's, any kind of a tree that has sort of like a little natural house around the base is great fun for children.
Yeah. And but I did also see what they call drunken trees, and that is when the permafrost under the taiga melts, those trees, their roots don't go down, they just go out. And so when the ice underneath them melts, they tilt at wild and crazy angles, because there's nothing supporting them anymore from the ice. And I saw that too at Denali. Well, it's 5 minutes left of the show, which is time for one quick call. And we'd love to hear from you at 866-240-1065. And this is the time in the first 2 years of the show when we get our letter from the future, which I'm really missing right now. I'm wondering how my great-great-granddaughter in the year 2300 is doing, but I'm sure she's doing fine. Let's see. So I want to tell people that if you want to see us if you want to go back over an episode and watch us on YouTube or Podomatic, you just search for A Green Future, and our show should pop right up there. And as I said, we're moving up in the ranks. We're actually doing very well in terms of the number of listeners to the show, and I'm very grateful to all of you for that. And please also consider, if you own a business, please consider becoming one of our sponsors. Please consider advertising on For a Green Future. If you're interested in that, you can call or text 419-973-5841. That's 419-973-5841. Or you can also email at any time for any purpose. You can email me at joe@joedemare foragreenfuture.org. And that's JOEDEMARE for, spell it out, FOR, greenfuture.org. And I'd love to hear from you. And I especially love to hear from those silent Republicans that Rebecca was talking about, the ones who maybe didn't vote for Trump in the primaries, the ones that are horrified by what happened this past Wednesday in Washington, D.C. If
you're better than this, people. Maybe only a little, but you're better than this.
Yes, they are. I do believe they're better than this. And if they need a little encouragement, if you need a little advice on how to bring out your better nature, how to counter the paranoid, violent, irrational elements that are taking over our society, how to talk to those people, please don't hesitate to email me, and I'll help walk you through it, because I have done it, and it does work. It's hard, but it's something that we all need to do if we want to preserve our democracy. And I believe the democracy is essential to preserving our environment. So there you go. It all connects together. Well, I hear the music, so I guess we've reached the end of this show. Stay strong, America. Stay democratic and stay free. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
Bye.
I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No,